welcome everybody. I'm Katy Wallace, and today I'm talking about how to balance blood pressure. I'm a naturopathic doctor with Human Nature, and I'm located in Madison, Wisconsin. This information is for health education reasons only, so should not be taken in place of medical advice. If you have any questions as we're going, please write them in the chat. We'll have some time to discuss things at the end of the talk. So today we're talking about high blood pressure, and the reason that blood pressure is a concern is that it can be an early cause for death and accounting for almost half of all deaths due to cardiovascular problems in our country. An estimated 75% of us will have high blood pressure or hypertension as a chronic health issue after we reach the age of 60. So as we're aging, it can become more and more of a problem. The body's having trouble regulating the blood pressure. But I have found, I'm now in my 18th year of working professionally as a naturopathic doctor. I found that naturopathy typically responds to many lifestyle interventions. So I'm excited to share some of those with you today. So I'm going to start by talking about how a low carbohydrate diet is instrumental for helping to lower blood pressure. Then we'll talk about the importance of drinking water and hydration. We'll talk about the importance of sun and why that helps lower blood pressure, exercise, sleep, stress management. I'll also talk about some of the key supplements that I find are instrumental in helping to balance blood pressure. And then for those really tricky cases, we'll talk about cases where a histamine response is keeping someone from being able to naturally lower their blood pressure. So if you are currently taking a blood pressure medication and working with your doctor and you want to use some of this advice that I'm sharing, I encourage you to reach out to your doctor. Let them know about these different lifestyle interventions that you want to try. A lot of times I can work one-on-one with the person and also be in communication with a doctor so that somebody can make a transition to more natural support in a way that is healthy. So the number one dietary recommendation that I have for helping to balance blood pressure is to reduce sugar in the diet. And it may seem obvious that refined sugar or white sugar is bad for you. But what I find when I'm working with people one-on-one, talking to them about high blood pressure, is that oftentimes they're getting a lot of sugar and carbohydrates from other sources besides just sodas or sweets or desserts. So for example, eating more than a couple pieces of fruit a day can sometimes be leading to the elevation in blood pressure for people. So you might not necessarily think about your whole grain bread or your whole grain alternative pasta that you love. But all of these things are carbohydrates. And what happens as we're aging is that the carbohydrates, when we digest them, they break down to sugars. And the sugars require a response for our body to make the hormone insulin. And as we get older, we make more and more insulin for the same amount of sugar to get it into our cells. And this process is called insulin resistance. So all of us, as we're aging, are naturally becoming more insulin resistant. And our body's blood pressure actually has a response to that gradual increase in insulin resistance also. And the blood pressure will become elevated because one of the effects of insulin is that it keeps the nervous system in what's called a sympathetic state. There's two general states for our nervous system to be in, sympathetic or parasympathetic. And when we're in a sympathetic state, more of the time, then the nervous system will be keeping the blood pressure elevated, sometimes no matter what else we're doing to try to lower it. And so I think a lot of people overlook the importance of diet and changing diet and the role of insulin in lowering blood pressure. But there are a number of studies, I have one quoted here, showing how the consumption of sweeter things definitely correlates with levels of high blood pressure. So it's very important to think about eliminating sugar from the diet and cutting back overall on the level of carbohydrates. Obviously, that can be easier said than done. Most Americans like to wake up and have their cereal, their hot cereal for breakfast, their sandwich for lunch, and their pasta or their rice or whatever for dinner. And so you've got to kind of unlearn those habits and make sure that you've got other foods dominating the dietary plan to help get your insulin levels under control. And then that translates to a benefit in being able to naturally lower the blood pressure. I like the paleo diet and as an example of a dietary template that can be really beneficial. A number of studies show that it helps to lower the blood pressure. A paleo diet has an emphasis on key proteins, animal proteins, so fish and seafood, grass-fed animals like bison or beef, and lots of plant foods. So instead of eating breads and processed sugary things, crackers, you're eating vegetables as a source of carbohydrates. And so in that way, there's a net drop in overall carbohydrate intake, and the carbs that you're taking in are generally much higher in vegetable fiber, which is beneficial for the gut biome, which can translate to helping with blood pressure too. So some of the other key things about the paleo diet that are beneficial is that overall, of course, it's balancing the blood sugar. And if you're balancing the blood sugar, you're balancing your nervous system and you're lowering blood pressure. Also, it helps with balancing stress hormone levels. If you're taking in protein every 3 to 4 hours throughout the day, then you're not going to be making as much of the stress hormone cortisol and other stress hormones that can lead to elevated blood pressure. Whatever diet you're on, you want to think about having regularly timed meals and snacks rather than just eating when you're hungry and sort of making impulsive or random decisions or grabbing something at the last minute. If you have a plan about what you're eating and you know what you're eating is nourishing and designed to support your health goal, then you're going to have success. Finally, a low carb approach, like I was saying, is going to be very effective because it's going to help get the nervous system locked out of the sympathetic state. So just to give you a general idea, what I mean by this is maybe 125 grams of carbs or less a day. I picked 125 grams as being about what maybe a very active, strong female would eat, somebody who's muscular, actively, most days of the week. Somebody who's more sedentary, lower muscle tone, is not going to tolerate even that much carbohydrate. They're going to need much less, maybe even need to be on more like a ketogenic type diet if they have a lot of blood sugar problems. And I talk in a lot of my other programs, the videos available on my website about the ketogenic diet if you're looking for more information about that type of approach. You don't necessarily have to be that extreme to see an improvement in the blood pressure, but I'm just trying to give you an idea that there's a lot of individual variation in diet, and so you're going to have to adjust it based on your lifestyle or begin to make some lifestyle changes if you don't like the template and want to have more flexibility. So that is one big thing, is just the carbohydrate piece in the diet. The second big thing is, what is the mineral content of your food? So I talk to people who are often eating pretty well at their meals, but then they're eating snack foods and they're eating processed or junk foods, maybe not all the time, but routinely enough where they're not getting the results they want. So I have pictured here, for example, crackers. They seem pretty innocuous. They look like they're plant-based and healthy. But this is an example of someone snacking on a lot of crackers where they're really missing the opportunity to eat things that would be much more nourishing for the body. The soils today are not as high in minerals as they were a few generations ago. We know this from multiple studies, studying our soils where our food is made. And so the food does not have the same mineral content. So by minerals, I mean magnesium, potassium, calcium, iodine. We know that all of these levels are lower now due to erosion in the soil. And so even someone on a pretty good diet might need to supplement their diet And a focus on whole fresh foods or frozen foods is going to be really important compared to something processed. Once you take the food and you process it into a flour to make something like crackers, just for example, you've lost a lot of the mineral content through that process. And so you're not ingesting the minerals and the density of nutrition that your body and your nervous system may need to stay optimally healthy and not have a blood pressure problem. I have a picture of the donuts here, just as an example of like a highly processed sugar, plus there'd be processed vegetable oils, which are also very unhealthy for the body. So this type of junk food is just providing empty calories. Also, it obviously has lost the minerals in the food production process, but when you eat these processed foods, they are more acidic because they don't have the minerals. And so you actually lose minerals from your body as a way of buffering the acidic processed food. So not only are you not getting in minerals that you could be if you made a different food choice, you're actually losing minerals and becoming more acidic, and that creates a number of health issues, including having a hard time balancing the blood pressure. So you want to work on a dietary plan that does not include these foods, or if they are in there once in a while, because life happens, they're just just a little blip. And the foundation of your diet is really strong, really solid, and supporting you to be the person that you want to become. So what you want to focus on are a lot of green vegetables I have pictured here. These are very high in potassium. Potassium is one of the key minerals that's needed to keep the blood pressure under control, just like magnesium and calcium. All of the different electrolytes that we eat play small roles, but potassium is one of them. And so many times I'm just talking to people about, how can you get more vegetables in your diet? Sure, most people have a serving or two or three at dinner. Well, let's talk about how to get some at lunch. And maybe we could even talk about how to get some at breakfast or a little bit at a snack. For those people that don't like to eat a lot of vegetables or are traveling, you can do something called a green drink, which is pictured here on the right. It's just a green powder of powdered vegetable extracts, and you just mix it up with a liquid and drink it. So that can be a great way to help provide more minerals. And people actually they feel pretty good. They make them in different flavors, so sometimes the flavor is a deterrent. But you can get chocolate flavored ones and ones that taste pretty good these days if that's an issue for you. There's a picture of my daughter here with a green drink mustache. So you can get people of all ages who don't like vegetables to eat them. The other group of foods that I think is often overlooked in terms of being mineral dense is animal foods. So fish and seafood, and especially red meats, are very, very high in minerals. So when I'm talking about eating mineral dense foods, those are the foods, in addition to the vegetable foods, that are going to be most beneficial. So I already mentioned the fish and seafood as being an important component of the paleo diet template, but this is really the third key piece of the diet that I feel is important for blood pressure control. So the first one was get your carbohydrate levels under control and get off sugar. The second was eat mineral-rich foods, lots of vegetables, and healthy animal foods. And the third would be have plenty of omega-3 in your diet. So that would mean eating fish or some kind of seafood daily or almost daily. If you're not eating it daily, then taking a fish oil and omega-3 supplement on those days can work for people that just don't like to eat it. Sometimes people like eating fish and seafood, but they maybe their family members don't, and so they have a harder time getting it into the routine. So for that, I usually suggest trying to get seafood in for lunch, for example, maybe a meal that's more independent for you. You could have a can of tuna or sardines, or salmon is great. Other people like to grill fish or bake fish and have it for dinner. That's really pretty easy and quick to do. Certainly, if you have leftovers and want to scramble it up with some eggs for breakfast, you can go for it. But the studies have shown that daily omega-3s consistently help lower blood pressure. Sometimes you need to know where you're at in order to know what dietary interventions are best. So this is an example of a home omega-3 test kit. I'm going to put this on my website today, so you should be able to order it from me at humannaturellc.com by the end of the day today if you're interested. It's just a pinprick of your finger, and you do a blood spot, and then you mail it to the lab, and then they send you your results. So you know, like, how am I doing in my omega-3 versus omega-6? And this goes far beyond blood pressure towards impacting our health. It's one of the most important things about your diet that you could assess and work on improving brain health, gut health, preventing reducing chronic disease, very important. I wrote a book called The Body Tune-Up. It was published last year, and it's just an example of a book that you can use that has a menu plan and recipes if you want to work on these dietary interventions I'm talking about, where you're eliminating sugar, really increasing the healthy vegetables, as well as the omega-3s, balancing your blood sugar, reducing inflammation. It's a great guide. Every year I take a group of people through the tune-up together. I do that every fall in a workshop, so you can stay tuned for that. And then we have a support group where we meet once a month to have ongoing support, because sometimes people need support to make a bigger dietary intervention. For some people, it's harder to just make a plan and stick to it. And so it can really help to have that sense of community around it. So you might be wondering, well, what about salt? And I know I'm also talking about animal products, so we can have some time in the discussion if you have questions about the newer science on animal products and blood pressure. But I think they're very helpful and instrumental in a diet to help someone overcome a high blood pressure issue. That doesn't mean that you couldn't overcome it if you were on a restricted vegetarian diet. But it can be harder. So anyway, back to salt. A lot of people are wondering about salt. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to check out my video on salt that's on my website. In general, the research is showing that there is no correlation between salt intake and cardiovascular illness. So eating more salt does not increase someone's risk for a heart attack or stroke. And this is a turnaround from what they were saying, 10 or 20 years ago. But you'll see that the government has been pulling back on their salt restriction because what the studies are finding, and these are large meta-analyses, they are finding that extreme salt restriction actually causes more death than it does help anybody. So I'm a big fan of salt. It is true that there is a subset of the population of people with high blood pressure who are sensitive to salt. And that looks to be about 30% from the studies that have been done. So that means 30% of people with hypertension or high blood pressure might get higher blood pressure when they eat too much salt, especially table salt, sodium chloride. So if you're in that group, then you should be careful about your salt. What we know about people in that group that are salt sensitive is that usually they have problems with their deficiencies in other minerals. So if you're not getting enough calcium, magnesium, and potassium, you're more prone to be salt sensitive. And if you are salt sensitive and you supplement or do things to improve those other mineral levels of calcium, potassium, magnesium, for example, then you become less salt sensitive. So the whole salt thing is more related to how mineral dense is your diet, or how good is your body at retaining those minerals and absorbing them from the diet. For the 70% other 70% of people with high blood pressure, that means you can eat more salt. You're not, you're not going to be salt sensitive. And then everybody who doesn't have high blood pressure or hypertension also should be eating an adequate amount of salt. Salt is really valuable for supporting your stress response, supporting your brain. It's a natural antihistamine. I'll go on and on about the benefits of salt in this video, so head on over to my website and check that out if you're interested. The next dietary intervention, or related to dietary intervention, is hydration. So we know that as people are more dehydrated or even slightly dehydrated, the body has to work harder to move the fluid, to move the blood around the body, and it will raise the blood pressure in response to mild dehydration. And obviously, the more dehydrated someone is, the more that can potentially influence their blood pressure. So, I mean, hydration's pretty straightforward. Fortunately, we're in a place where we have access to great quality water. So for women, that means drinking 2 to 3 quarts of water daily. For men, 3 to 4 quarts of water daily. And usually this just comes down to making a plan. So a good time to drink water is in the morning. Sometimes when people aren't distracted by the rest of the day, to try to get a couple tall glasses of water in. For other people, a strategy of filling up a pitcher of the amount of water that you want to drink by the end of the day in the morning works, and then you can see your progress throughout the day and empty the pitcher by the evening. Other people, having a special water bottle works. You can log what you're drinking in different apps, just like you can log calories and steps and everything else. So it really just comes down to making it a priority and having a plan. When I was in naturopathy school, I had a mentor who would talk about resolving people's blood pressure just by giving them a gallon of distilled water. So you have them drink a cup of water every hour, which is not that much, and see. And I would say I find that to be effective for a good proportion of the people I work with who have high blood pressure. Just focus on hydration will go a long way towards improving the blood pressure. So I'm talking about a lot of different interventions today, and for some of you, 1 or 2 of these may help with lowering your blood pressure. Other people may need to do multiple interventions, multiple different lifestyle changes in order to see a benefit. So everybody's a little bit different. This is an example of a comprehensive metabolic panel test result. So it's like a $10 test. Most people can ask their doctor for it, or I can help you get blood work done if you don't have access to affordable testing. And this is really helpful for checking someone's hydration and electrolyte status. If you're wondering, can I have salt? How's my potassium? Then working with someone like myself, where we're really trying to optimize the levels, can be really helpful. The ranges that you see on the right in this right column are typically just medical averages based on the people who get their blood tested. So it's really not enough if you have a chronic condition and it's not getting better, or you're really interested in optimizing your health. It's not enough to look and see, am I in the normal range? Okay, then I'm fine. If you really want to optimize things, you need to know what are the optimal ranges. And that's where working with someone like myself can be really helpful, because we have the experience and the depth of knowledge to help give you some guidance in interpreting these tests.